Welcome to the podcast. What is the story that you've been telling yourself that may not even be true? Is it that, hey, I'm too old, or I'm too young, or I'm not pretty enough, I'm not smart enough, I don't know, I made too many mistakes, I'm broken, this is my last chance? What are the stories and the thoughts that you're telling yourself? For me, it was that I did not graduate college and I didn't get my degree. And that was the biggest insecurity that I had until I really worked with a leadership coach. So I want to share this story with you in hopes that it helps someone else. So when I grew up, my parents really couldn't afford college. And so I paid for about 3 years of college, going to night school and 2 years full time. And then I just got a job because I had gotten married and I needed a job. And so I was working, I was growing in my career, I was a single mom. And well, I wasn't a single mom when I first started out, but I became a single mom and just really growing in my career. And I got to a place in my career where I felt like, how do I get to the next level? And I had asked my CEO boss at the time, I said, should I go back to college? Should I get a degree? Should I, just keep going? I was traveling every single week. I didn't have a lot of time and I was a single mom at the time. So I really didn't think that college was necessarily going to help me get to the next level because I was doing what I would love to do, which was advocating for people with disabilities. And I was working with health plans and, negotiating. And I just really loved what I was doing. And so my CEO boss said, well, Melissa, unless you want to go back to school and, be a lawyer or be a physical therapist or something that requires a degree, then and if you love what you're doing, then no, just keep what you're doing. And I knew that he would compensate for me for what I was doing and if I was doing a good job. And I thought, why do this? It's going to cost me a lot more money and I don't have the time for it. And right now I'm making more money than a lot of people that I knew. So I just believed him and I guess just decided, let's keep going. Let's just keep doing this. And I grew a career that I really loved. I can tell you though, that as I, worked my way up the chain, the ladder, the corporate ladder, I got to a point where this was really still bothering me inside. I was having some insecurities because I started working with people who were really, really smart. And if you've ever worked with a bunch of private equity guys, they're really, really smart. And I also was working with a new senior leadership team that these guys all went, not all, but some of them went to some Ivy League colleges. And for me, my insecurities were really getting to me. I was thinking that maybe I wasn't smart enough or, just because I didn't have a degree. And so this really was like, I guess, coming out in different ways. And at one point, I think my CEO boss at that time said, the only thing that's going to get in your way is if you allow your own insecurities to get the best of you. And I was really ticked off by hearing him say that, but I knew it was true. And so I started working with a leadership coach, and I'm very thankful for the company that invested in me. And I worked with Taavo Godfredson for a good year and a half. He works with CEOs and CFOs all over the country. And he asked me one day, Melissa, what's your biggest insecurity? And I was like, I don't even want to share that with you, Taavo, because I think you're going to go back and like share it with my boss. And I didn't know if he knew or not, didn't know at the time, but I just really, it was something that like I was ashamed of. I didn't want to tell people that I didn't graduate college. And so I said, well, he said, come on now. Melissa, you have to trust me and just tell me. And so I said, okay, all right, Taavo, it's that I didn't graduate college. And he said, okay. And he goes, well, do you want to go back to college? I said, no. He said, do you think that getting a degree or, this certification or a piece of paper or degree is going to, help you make more money? And I said, no. And he said, well, and that's nothing you want to do? Anything you want to do? And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I love what I'm doing. I'm good at what I'm doing and I don't have time for that. And he said, okay, well, what's another story you could tell yourself? And I said, well, all these guys, on my senior leadership team, they went to these Ivy League schools. They have this Jack Welch leadership training because they worked at GE, and these companies invest a lot in leadership training. And I said, I don't know, maybe these guys are smarter than me somehow or whatever. And he said, well, what's another story you could tell yourself, Melissa? And I said, well, that I have 25 plus years of domain expertise in this business. I grew up working next door, right next to the CEO every single day. And I know this business like the back of my hand. And, I probably know more than maybe they'll ever know, because while they might have great leadership skills, maybe they didn't understand the business. Now, maybe now that's not the case. They've been in the business a while, but at the time, I really had a lot of domain expertise, and I was telling myself this story that I wasn't smart enough, or I didn't know how to get to the next level. And really, he said, well, why don't you start telling yourself a different story? Why don't you start telling yourself that story? And I thought about that, and it sounds so simple, right? Just tell yourself a different story. But for me, it just allowed me to, I was thinking, yeah, you're right, Taavo, I should tell myself a different story. And I started thinking that way. And I remember when I would tell my son, these things, he would say, look, Mom, he's like, you did all this without a degree. Why don't you think of it that way? You were successful. You've made a lot of money. You've helped a lot of people. You are successful, and you didn't need a degree. And I said, yeah, it's funny that you see it like that, but I didn't see it like that. And so that's also why I worked very hard to be able to afford to put my two kids through college and pay for it myself, because I wanted them to have something that I didn't have, and to maybe be at the next level, I guess. I thought I was missing out on something. I don't know. Maybe I missed out on all the college parties or something. I had enough parties, I'm sure. But I don't know. The reason I want to share this with you is I want you to know that no matter what you're telling yourself, maybe it's that, you believe that you're too old for something, or you're too young for something, or you don't have the right experience, or, you don't look the part, or, it's too late. You've gotten divorced. You'll never meet another person. You'll never meet the right one. Like, those are all stories and lies that we tell ourselves. And I just think I want to make sure to encourage you just to kind of reframe it, right? What is another positive story you can tell yourself? A lot of times when I coach people, I know that we're always prone to think about our negative thoughts. 80% of our thoughts are negative, and we always want to go to the negative for whatever reason. And I always encourage people to tell yourself a different story. What's a story? What would be a story that your best friend would say about you? Or what's a story that God would say about you? So I want to end with this Bible verse. It says, it's 1 Samuel 16:7. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. God sees our heart, and that's all that really matters. I want to encourage you today, if you are sitting there thinking negative thoughts, tell yourself a different story. It's okay to ask questions. It's all okay to seek out somebody who might be able to help you, but we don't have to stay in these negative thoughts. We can change our mindset, change our mind, change our thoughts. You don't have to change your past. You just have to tell yourself a different story. If you enjoyed this episode of the See the Unseen podcast, please share it with someone else and pay it forward. I encourage you also to leave a comment below, as I try and read all of them. So hit the subscribe button if you'd like to receive notifications of new upcoming episodes. And if no one's told you today, you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved. Thank you so much for allowing me to share my podcast with you, and I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode.